Talking up the Dogs on defense here at the Voice of College Football, courtesy Palmer Toms of Dogs 247 Sports. Join Palmer right there covering Georgia football. And as we take on the defense here at linebacker, Nakobi Dean, obviously so productive last year, 71 tackles to lead the team. And Nolan Smith, obviously a guy that since he's come into the program, much has been expected of him. 2.5 sacks and 2.5 tackles for loss. But again, much like the defensive front, just waves and waves of players that are looking for playing time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start inside and work outside with the linebackers. And this defense really starts with Nakobi Dean. He is absolutely the field general for Georgia. You heard Kirby Smart say that this spring when Dean was limited. It certainly was, he was limited, and it didn't help Georgia in the fact that they didn't have him on the field. But where it did help them was, it wasn't hurting them. It was preseason, spring practice, where you're able to get some of these other guys more comfortable in a role that they will ultimately end up playing alongside Dean. I think, he returns as the leading tackler for Georgia, had 71 stops, which was by far the lead for the Bulldogs. I think you saw him playing alongside Monty Rice, who was selected, in the NFL draft. I think, again, this is a situation where things are going to open up for Nakobi Dean a little bit more. And I think you could see him. I'm not willing to say that he's going to have a Roquan Smith type season where he goes for over 100 tackles and is just, the absolute, by far and away, the best linebacker in college football. But I think that Dean has a lot of the same skills that Roquan had, where he is able to get sideline to sideline. He's able to get out and cover, some of these running backs. I think the ceiling is very high for Nakobi Dean in his third year with the program, and what I would expect to be his last year with the program. He has played, a big part for Georgia in each of his first 2 years. The second year especially came into a bigger role. Seeing Tay Crowder leave for the NFL, he came into a bigger role as a sophomore, and now seeing Monty Rice leave for the NFL. I think you can expect Dean to play a bigger role as a junior. Alongside him, you're going to be piecing it together at inside linebacker. Inside linebackers coach Glenn Schumann is a guy that likes to rotate, probably 4 guys at the inside linebacker position. You've certainly got Nakobi Dean there. Channing Tindall has been a part of that rotation in the past, and I would absolutely expect him to be a part of that rotation as well. Same with Quay Walker. Those 2 guys are probably battling it out for the starting spot next to Nakobi Dean. I would give the edge to Quay Walker, but I think Tindall is certainly going to have something to say about that. And if he doesn't end up, whichever one doesn't end up winning that job, they are absolutely the next guy up at both inside linebacker positions. They're not all that different from each other in Georgia's defense with the way that they run it. And they both, are expected to have big breakout seasons. I would expect both of them. They're both in their fourth year with the program and very comfortable with Georgia's system. Hasn't changed much during their time, especially these last couple of years. And I think that those 2 are ready to break out. Walker ended up finishing 4th on the team in tackles with 43 stops, and Channing Tindall had 15. I would absolutely expect Tindall's numbers to go up, and I think you're probably going to see someone emerge as that 4th linebacker. Whether it's a young guy like what Nakobi Dean was when he was coming up. Monty Rice, played a integral part early on in his career. I think you could see that happening, but Georgia's got talent upon talent at that inside linebacker room, and I think and really in the linebacker room in general, with the way that they use some of these outside linebackers. In third down situations, they'll use them as an inside linebacker more to get after the passer, spy the quarterback, whatnot. So I think, you're going to see someone emerge as that fourth linebacker. I just don't know who yet. And looking at the outside linebackers, Georgia loses a lot of production there. Aziz Ogilari was absolutely, Georgia's leader on defense this past year. Quite possibly the best player that Georgia had defensively. And I think a lot of people expected him to be the first Bulldog to come off the board in the NFL draft. He ended up being third, going in the top 50 to the New York Giants. But he's a guy that was able to get after the quarterback, led the team in tackles for loss, led the team in sacks, and was an absolute force to be reckoned with, on defense. I think, replacing him is no easy task. And add in the fact that you lose Jermaine Johnson, who was a former highly recruited JUCO player. When he came to Georgia, he transfers to Florida State for this year. And I think, but that opens the door for guys that were very highly rated recruits coming out of high school in Adam Anderson and Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith, the number one player in the country in 2019, is you mentioned him earlier. He's a guy that is going to step up and play a bigger part. Adam Anderson I believe he was the number one outside linebacker in his 2018 class. And, he had, 6.5 sacks last year, was second on the team in tackles for loss, second on the team in sacks as well. And so I think, he's a guy that I think both these guys in Anderson and Smith, I think Georgia fans are really excited to see what they can do, being the guys in that room. There's not a ton of proven talent behind them. MJ Sherman would be, there, as well as a couple of younger guys in Smile Munden and Xavier Sori. I think both those guys could play a role, whether it's, in specific package situations where they're spying the quarterback, getting after the quarterback in third downs. Munden is a guy that could play inside, and could develop into an inside linebacker role, maybe filling that fourth inside linebacker spot. I think that there's a lot of room for this Georgia linebacker group, be it inside and outside, to grow and develop a lot of young talent there, and some guys that have been around the program but haven't had their chance to be, one of the, top 2-3 guys. I think the guys like, Anderson, Smith, Walker, Tyndall, they're all ready to break out in their third and fourth years with the program.
On to cornerback. And I would never look at any unit on this team, offense or defense, and say that's a weakness, because I don't think that exists. But maybe question mark. We'll say there are some question marks there. Yeah, so we've got a couple of cornerbacks who left basically in the first round of the NFL draft, in the first 30 to 35 picks, 3 defensive backs total. And then Tyreek Stevenson, 5th on the team in tackles last year, goes to Miami. Taiki Smith, obviously a huge pickup from West Virginia as a second-team All-America and a all Big 12 performer, is key there, as I think he projects to a slot corner. But sort all that out for us at corner.
Yeah, I'll start with Taiki Smith since you mentioned him. Former All-American at West Virginia, ends up transferring in and has a chance to be a very big player for Georgia in early on in his career. Like you said, probably projects to be that slot corner. Georgia calls it the star, and I think that's probably, it's more of a hybrid of a safety and a linebacker than it is a traditional corner. You've seen Georgia use it as a corner in the past, where, you mentioned Tyreek Stevenson. He played that part. He's now transferred out to Miami, but he was, very much so a corner by trait, came out of the high school ranks as a corner, developed into that star that was a bigger guy. But, last year in the Peach Bowl, ended up playing on the outside when Georgia was down, a couple of those draftees that opted out of the bowl game. Another guy that they lose at the position would be Mark Webb. He's probably more of that safety guy, that's more of a tackler. But again, another big loss. He was drafted by the Chargers. At the traditional outside corner, like I said, you're going to see, you're losing Eric Stokes, Tyson Campbell, DJ Daniel, and Tyreek Stevenson has some experience playing on the outside. So that was absolutely Georgia's biggest question mark entering spring practice. And it was one that they addressed heavily. I think it's easy to address, a question like that when they're constantly being challenged by, Georgia's talented wide receiver room. And they're having to go up against a passing game that is continuing to improve and continuing to build and be, challenge teams. It's easy to go up and get your fair share of talent and challenges, early on in practice. Amir Speed, Jalen Kimber, and Keely Ringo were the three guys that kind of pulled away from the field there at corner in spring practice. Nyland Green, who is going to be a true freshman this fall, he was a part of that rotation. And Georgia does like to rotate their corners. Like I mentioned earlier, with Eric Stokes, Tyson Campbell, DJ Daniel, all three of those guys were getting run at corner, when they were all healthy. I think that Georgia would like to have two guys that they feel very comfortable in, but with the amount of guys, with the amount that these guys are running, you've got to be able to feel comfortable with your third, your fourth option there. And I think Georgia absolutely developed some depth there. Coming out of fall or spring practice and into the summer, I think Georgia expected that they were going to address cornerback in the transfer portal, and they did. But I think it was certainly beneficial to develop all three of those guys and have them believing that there's a chance that they could be, those three guys could make up the three-man rotation. Like I said, Georgia addresses the need in the transfer portal. They go out and get former five-star Darian Kendrick. We talked about it earlier when he came in, but he's a guy that I would expect to be the number one corner from day one. Absolutely fills a need for Georgia at that position. He's got big game experience. He's been tested by, teams, in practice against Clemson, in games against Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama. Those teams, really, really challenged Kendrick. And it shows up on the stat sheet. And I think a lot of Georgia fans, I think the national perception is that you could be a little bit concerned about that, with the way that he has performed against those teams versus, say Clemson's lesser competition in the ACC. But at the same time, think about the receivers he's going up against, and you're not going to be facing a Chris Olave every game. You're not going to be facing a Garrett Wilson every game. And so, I think in terms of what he brings to the table is he brings some of that big game experience, and Georgia's going to need it, from day one, with Kendrick getting to square off against his former team. That's certainly going to be a storyline to watch leading up to that game and on game day. And it's going to be entertaining to watch. I think, he's going to get after it with his former teammates. I have no doubt about that. But at the same time, Georgia's going to be counting on him to, keep a level head and make some plays in the backfield, in the defensive backfield. I think, Georgia needs him to be a leader because of the experience that he has. Georgia didn't have a lack of talent. They had a lack of experience. And so by bringing in a talented, experienced player in Kendrick, you've got your number one guy figured out. You've got to figure out that number two position with Speed, Kimber, and Ringo all being a part of that, all in the mix there. I think, regardless of who wins the job, more than one of them is going to be, and probably all three of those guys, along with Kendrick, are going to be a part of Georgia's rotation and a part of their plans at the cornerback position.
Folks, please give us a like. Share the videos out on social media. Let people know that we're here talking college football every day here at the Voice of College Football. And, of course, check out Palmer Tom's work at Dogs 247 Sports. Lewis Seen didn't just fill up the box score with 52 tackles, but he had the kind of impact hits that would hit the highlight reels and people would take notice of on a pretty routine basis across college football. And so we'll start the safety position with him.
Yeah, he is a player that certainly got Georgia fans excited. Seeing him play last year as a full-time starter, He came to Georgia as a very talented player out of high school, which it feels like I'm saying that over and over again. And that's just, what Georgia has done with the way that they've recruited over these last couple of seasons. You're bringing in talented players left and right, and talented guys are sitting behind these guys that we're mentioning today that are going to be the frontliners. But, I think in terms of scene, you feel very confident with what you've got. In terms of the secondary as a whole, I think you've got question marks at the outside. You feel decent about what you've got at an inside corner position because you bring in an All-American there, but you feel very confident in terms of what you've got on the back end of the secondary at safety with Lewis Cine and Christopher Smith as well. You are replacing Richard LeCount, who has been a mainstay in that secondary for Georgia the last 3 seasons. But, the good news, and it obviously was unfortunate for Richard the way that his season ended, going down with an injury off the field on October 31st. He did end up getting to finish his year on the field, was on the field for Georgia's final play of the Peach Bowl, which was a great moment to see for him and Kirby Smart. They've got a great relationship. He was one of those guys one of Kirby Smart's early recruits, a guy that kind of helped form the identity of these Georgia recruiting classes over the last couple of years. So, it's going to be tough to replace Richard LeCount. He was a very vocal guy on the defense, made plays when he was out there, forced turnovers, felt like every time there was a ball on the ground or a ball in the air that ended up coming down Georgia's way, Richard LeCount was somehow a part of it, whether it was him picking it off, him tipping it, him forcing the fumble, him coming up with it. It's going to be challenging to replace him, but Georgia got, like I said, with his injury on, Halloween night, Georgia was able to get some experience, replacing him. And, I think back to the Auburn game, they had him go down with, be ejected due to targeting. And you had Chris Smith thrown into the fire there in a top 10 matchup. And so, I think, Smith is tested. He's gone up against Florida, Cincinnati, Auburn, a passing game in Missouri that was pretty talented. Mississippi State wanted to sling the ball around. Georgia feels very confident in terms of what they've got with Chris Smith at the secondary position at the safety position alongside Lewis Cine. And another thing that is beneficial, going back to Taiki Smith, where this whole secondary conversation started, bringing him in, and him being able to play the star position, it opens things up for Georgia to cross train guys at star and safety, at star and corner, at corner and safety. I think that you're going to see guys that are in practice are getting reps at multiple positions in the secondary because, as we both know, a guy can go down with an injury. A guy can cramp in an early season game that's hot out, and you got to feel comfortable with your replacements there. I think Georgia feels very comfortable with the replacements, the guys that they would have at corner because of the amount of guys, the 4 or 5 guys that are in the mix there for a starting job. I think at star you feel very comfortable with, Tyki Smith, but you've also got Latavius Brini, who played in the Peach Bowl and against Missouri. You feel very comfortable with what you've got with him at star. The great thing is that both those guys, Tyki Smith and Brini, have experience at safety as well. And you could, if Georgia were to lose Chris Smith at safety, or Lewis Cine at safety due to targeting, you could plug in Taiki Smith at safety and have Latavius Brini play star. You could play Latavius Brini at safety and have Smith stay at star. So I think Georgia feels very confident in what they've got with this secondary. A lot of talent, not as much experience as there is talent, but it's certainly going to be a position that they continue to develop, and a position that is getting a lot of help from that front seven that we've mentioned. You only have to cover these guys as long as the quarterback is standing, and if these Georgia edge rushers can get to the passer, that just means a shorter amount of time that these Georgia secondary players have to cover talented wide receivers.
Jack Podlesny's season was pretty much marked by one kick. and it was a great one, a 53-yarder to close out Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl with the win there. Jake Camarda is one of the best in the business as well. So the specialist is in good hands on both accounts, and Podlesny hit on 13 of 16. So if you run through the special teams, of course, start with those two guys. They're two of the best in the land. And just coverage units, who you can expect returning kicks and punts. Certainly that a lot of that gets sorted out in fall camp and is tough to project, but give us the list as best you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to cover specialists when you're talking Georgia. Has a history of great specialists, punters and kickers, especially. And Podlesny was put in a challenging situation last year, having to replace Rodrigo Blankenship. I mean, those were big shoes to fill, and I think he did it to the best of his ability. Georgia fans obviously, remember what he did in the Peach Bowl, sealing that game out. But he made some big kicks throughout the season, as well. I feel Georgia feels very confident with what they've gotten him, and I believe that he's probably going to end up on scholarship this year, which is obviously great to see for a kid like that. And then Camarda, like you said, one of the best punters in the country. He ends up deciding to return for his fourth year. Probably could have gone to the NFL draft and been picked. But I think with a guy like that, with a position like that, you want to get your education, you want to get your degree, and he's got a chance to do that this year while continuing to raise his draft stock. He is a weapon for Georgia, and he's a guy that I absolutely considered putting in the top 25 most important players. Both these guys, but Camarda especially, because of the way that he can flip the field, and he hit some booming punts last year. He is going to be a weapon and a threat for Georgia on special teams this year. In terms of the return game, like you said, it's a lot of mixing and matching that gets figured out during fall camp. Zamir White has been back on several kickoffs. You've seen James Cook back there a little bit as well. He ended up having a little bit of a problem. Let a ball go that he probably shouldn't have let go. And I think, you saw White back there with Kyrus Jackson. But like I mentioned earlier, Kenny McIntosh is a guy that had great success in the return game before his injury. He could be a weapon there. Georgia's got a small receiver, Ladd McConkey, that could be a threat in either the kickoff return or punt return game. He ended up returning some punts in G-Day. Jackson returned punts in G-Day as well. So I think that's a lot of that is what will get figured out during fall camp. In terms of coverage units, the blessing that you have in bringing in talented players, Kirby Smart is not afraid to use his best players on these coverage units. But the blessing that you have in having talented players as on not even in your two deep is that you can bring in a 5-star and have him on your coverage unit, and have him have fresh legs because he's not playing on defense because he's, a 5-star freshman. And so guys like Sorey, Munden, several guys that have, I've mentioned on these, outside linebacker units and stuff, you could see them on coverage units. Tresman Marshall is a guy that has a chance to be that fourth inside linebacker, but has absolutely been a part of, and Ryan Davis too. Both those guys have a chance to be that fourth inside linebacker for Georgia, but have been a part of these special teams units. Quay Walker and Channing Tindall have done that. So, I think with what Georgia has in terms of the talent and the depth at these linebacker positions, it only benefits them on these coverage units where, you can feel very comfortable putting in several 5-stars and letting them, get some run, get some experience, maybe build up some confidence. And it's a situation where, a lot of these guys prove themselves to be a weapon on special teams. And then you see them continue to develop into a bigger role at their, more natural position. But that's the place that you will probably see some of these talented 5-stars, 4 and 5 stars, blue chip guys on the field first, playing special teams for Georgia this fall.
We always enjoy the information, the insight, the conversation with Palmer Toms from Dogs 247 Sports. That is some serious work you just put in there, Palmer. Knocking out the offense, the defense, the special teams. We got the whole roster breakdown from Palmer. Excellent stuff. We appreciate it, Palmer.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Mark.